Okay, everybody, what we're going to do today is we're going to be talking about bonds payable. Okay, and this is really talking about how a bond works. And there's a big hint. It's like an interest only loan. If I have an interest only loan, I am only paying interest and then I'm going to repay the principal in the future. Where I see a lot of students getting confused, is it like a mortgage? And the answer is no, because most mortgages contain both a principal and an interest element. When we're going through and looking at bonds payable, what we're more interested in is like, okay, this is like an interest only loan. I pay interest every single year or every 6 months, and then I'm going to be paying back the full amount. So again, I want you to think about this as an interest only loan. Also, with a bond payable, the interest rate is going to be fixed. We call that the stated rate. The full amount of the bond is going to be due at the end of the loan term. So when we receive money as a result of a bond issuance, we're going to have two things that are happening. We're going to be paying interest on that bond, and then we're going to be paying the principal amount at the end of it. Now, here are some different terminologies. Face value of a bond refers to the total dollar amount of the bonds that are being issued. This is a very, very important amount. It's not necessarily going to be the amount of cash that we actually receive, right? But it's just the face value of the bond. So sometimes referred to par value, and the bond's going to be issued in denominations. You could have like $50, $1,000 bonds. The bond term refers to the length of time that the bond will be outstanding. The bond is going to be repaid at the end of the term. Now, if you're talking about bonds that are being issued between interest dates, that's intermediate accounting. That's not what we're doing here. The stated rate of interest on the bond is the amount of the interest that is going to be paid out. So if I have $1 million bond that has a 6% stated interest rate, the amount of interest, and if it's being paid annually, the amount of interest that the bond will pay is going to be $1 million times 6% or $60,000. So now the market rate of interest is the prevailing market rate. So once we figure out what the bond is going to pay according to the bond indenture, what they'll call the bond contract, what we're then going to do is we're going to take that principal amount or take that bond amount that's going to be paid at the end of the term and the interest rates, and then we're going to go using the market rate of interest, we're going to go through and determine the value of the bond. Note that the stated rate is not going to necessarily equal the market rate of interest. The market rate of interest is only used for present valuing. Another thing over here is whenever you see an interest rate, always assume that the rate is an annual rate of interest. So it's a 12-month rate. If the bond, though, pays interest semi-annually, just divide the annual rate by 2. But remember, the number of interest payments is also, instead of once per year, it'll be 2 per year because it's semi-annual. If the bond pays interest quarterly, divide the annual rate by 4. So let's just take a look over here and let's see what this looks like if we go through and prep. Let's just take a look at how do these cash payments on a bond work. So over here, we've got a $10 million 7-year term bond at a rate of 9%. And then we've got a $20 million 8-year term bond that's going to be paying interest semi-annually. So let's go through and take a look at that. So over here, if we say we're issuing this bond on 1/1/26 and it's an annual rate. So basically over here, 12/31/26, we'll call this year 1. Okay, so every single year so it's a 7-year term. So how is this going to actually go through and work? Well, we got over here. So every single year, the bond is going to be paying interest. So what is it going to be paying? Well, the interest amount, or we'll call this the cash paid for interest, right? What is this amount going to be? To figure out the cash paid for interest, we're going to take the face amount of the bond, which in this case over here is going to be $10 million. Okay, my interest rate Remember, whenever we see an interest rate, it is always going to be an annual rate. So my annual rate of interest on a $10 million bond is going to be $900,000 per year. So my cash paid for interest is going to be $900,000 every single year. This is what the bond is saying it's going to be going through and paying. But remember too, that it's like an interest-only loan. At the end of the bond's term, so the end of the basically at the end of the bond's term over here, I'm going to be making a $10 million payment. Remember, it's like an interest-only loan. I've got to pay back that face amount of the bond at the end of the bond's term. Now, in terms of the cash that I receive, it's going to depend upon what the market interest rate is. I'm going to do that on a later problem, not on this problem. But this is here just to get you familiar with how the payment schedules work. Let's now take a look at a bond that basically has an 8-year term and it's going to pay interest semi-annually, right? What does that mean? It's going to be paying interest every 6 months. So the bond is issued on 1/1/27, and the first interest payment is going to be on 6/30/27. Okay, so this is going to take me a little bit longer, but let's just go here and do it. Let's have some fun because accounting is fun. Okay, so let's do this. I'm just going to pause real quick. So right over here, this bond is going to be paying, it's an 8-year bond, but it's paying interest twice per year. So there is going to be a total of 16 payments. So every 6 months, there is going to be a payment. So let's figure out what is the interest payment going to be. So right over here, well, let's do the easy part first. The face value of the repayment for this bond is going to be $20 million, right? I know I'm going to have to pay that right at the end of 8 years. That's going to be the amount that I'm going to be repaying at the end of 8 years, right? So over here, 20 million bucks. Okay, so right over here. So what is the amount of the interest payment? So if my face value of the bond, and remember, you want to use the face value of the bond to determine the amount of interest being paid. So this is my face value. Whenever I see an interest rate, it is always an annual rate. My annual rate of interest, right? What does that mean? It's going to be for 12 months. So over here, my annual interest is going to be 20 million times 8% or 1.6 million. However, this bond is paying interest twice per year. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to multiply this through by 6/12. 6 divided by 12 months are 1/2. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get 800,000. So my cash paid for interest every 6 months, it is going to be $800,000. So when I'm going through and trying to go through and figure out the payments, this is what it would look like. This bond is going to pay $800,000 every 6 months for 8 years, or a total of 16 periods. So this is going to be the way the payments are being sent out. I'm spending a little bit more time with this just without doing any type of market interest rates and present valuing, because I believe it is extremely important for you to really see how these bonds actually go through and pay out. So with that being said, I want to thank you for joining me here today. Please leave any questions you might have below. I appreciate you liking and subscribing to the videos. If there's anything else you'd like to see, please feel free to reach out to me. I look forward to seeing you on the next video, and have a great day.